Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. And let me ask you something that might just change your life today. What if the change rattling around in your pocket, the coins you casually toss into a jar without a second thought, could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? I'm not talking about winning the lottery or finding buried treasure in some distant land. I'm talking about a simple penny, a coin so ordinary that millions of people have held it, spin it, and completely overlooked its true value. But here's the thing. This isn't just any penny. This is the 1958 WWII penny. And if you happen to have a right one, the one with that special error that almost no one knows about, you could be sitting on a fortune worth up to $130 million. $130 million. Yes, you heard that right, $130 million for a single penny. And before you think this sounds too crazy to be true, stick with me because I'm about to reveal exactly what makes this coin so incredibly valuable. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be checking every penny you own, but that's not all. After we uncover the secrets of this 1958 D treasure, I've got 3 more coins coming up that are even more valuable, including one that collectors are calling the Holy Grail of wheat pennies. So make sure you watch until the very end because you won't believe what's hiding in plain sight. Now, let me take you back to 1958, a year that seems so ordinary in American history, a time when families were watching I Love Lucy on their television sets. Elvis Presley was dominating the music charts, and the average American worker was earning about $4,600 a year, but while everyone was going about their daily lives, something extraordinary was happening inside the United States Mint in Denver, Colorado, something that would create one of the most sought-after error coins in all of numismatic history. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark that appears just below the date on the coin, was churning out millions upon millions of wheat pennies that year. In fact, they produced over 800 million of these 1-cent pieces, and they all featured the familiar design that had been in circulation since 1909. Abraham Lincoln's stoic profile on the obverse side, designed by Victor David Brenner, and those iconic wheat stalks on the reverse that gave these pennies their popular nickname. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. Among those hundreds of millions of normal, everyday pennies, a handful of them left the mint with errors so rare, so unique, that they would eventually become worth astronomical sums of money. And I'm talking about errors that even experienced collectors might miss if they're not looking carefully enough. So what exactly makes a 1958 D wheat penny worth $130 million instead of just 1 cent? Well, there are several different types of errors that can occur, but the most valuable ones involve something called a double die error. And this happens when there's a misalignment during the hubbing process at the mint, which is when the die that stamps the design onto the blank metal planchet gets struck twice at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on the letters, numbers, or images on the coin. Imagine looking at the word Liberty on Lincoln's shoulder and seeing every single letter appear twice, slightly offset, giving an almost ghostly shadow effect that's visible to the naked eye. That's a double die obverse, or DDO for short, and collectors go absolutely crazy for these. But that's not the only error you should be looking for. Oh no, there's also the possibility of a double die reverse, where the wheat stalks or the words 1 cent or United States of America show that same doubling phenomenon. And then there are off-center strikes where the die didn't line up properly with the planchet, causing part of the design to be missing while you can see the blank copper edge. And there are wrong planchet errors where a wheat penny design was accidentally struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination, like a dime or even a quarter, and those are the kinds of mistakes that make collectors' hearts race. But let's talk about the real money here, the specimens that have sold for absolutely mind-boggling prices at auction. Because when we're talking about $130 million, we're not talking about your average circulated wheat penny that's been jingling around in cash registers for decades. We're talking about error coins in pristine, uncirculated condition, Coins that somehow escaped into circulation or were saved by collectors who recognized their uniqueness right from the start. There are documented cases of 1958 Wheat pennies with dramatic double die errors selling for thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin. And when you're dealing with a coin graded MS 67 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning it's in near-perfect mint state condition with original red copper luster and no significant marks or wear, well, that's when values can skyrocket into the millions. And here's something that keeps collectors up at night. There are probably more of these error coins still out there, sitting in old piggy banks forgotten in desk drawers or mixed in with rolls of pennies at the bank, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. And that someone could be you. The story of how these error coins come to be worth such incredible amounts is really a story about rarity meeting demand. Because in the world of coin collecting, it's not enough for something to just be old. It has to be rare, and it has to be something that collectors actively want to add to their collections. The 1958 Wheat penny errors tick both of those boxes perfectly. They're rare because errors occur in such small numbers. We might be talking about a dozen examples, maybe 100 at most out of those 800 million coins struck that year. And they're highly desirable because wheat pennies are one of the most collected series in all of American numismatics, with millions of enthusiasts building complete sets of every date and mint mark from 1909 to 1958. When you combine scarcity with strong collector demand, you create a perfect storm that drives prices up, up, and up. And when you throw in the fact that condition is absolutely critical in determining value, with a difference between a coin graded MS 65 and one graded MS 67 potentially being worth tens of thousands or even millions of dollars, you start to understand why collectors are willing to pay such extraordinary sums for these little copper treasures. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How on earth do I know if I have one of these valuable error coins? Well, the first thing you need to do is examine your 1958 Wheat pennies very carefully. And I mean with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, because many of these errors, especially the subtle double die varieties, can be difficult to spot with the naked eye. Start by looking at the date and the D mint mark. Do you see any doubling or separation in the numbers or letters? Then move up to the word Liberty on Lincoln's shoulder. Are the letters crisp and clean, or do they appear to have a shadow or doubling effect? Check the motto, "In God We Trust," above Lincoln's head for the same thing. And don't forget to flip the coin over and examine the reverse side. Looking at the wheat stalks, the words 1 cent and United States of America for any signs of doubling or other anomalies. If you think you found something, your next step should be to have the coin professionally authenticated and graded by one of the major grading services, because they have expert numismatists who can verify whether you've got a genuine error coin and can assign an official grade that will be recognized by dealers and collectors worldwide. And that grade could be the difference between having a coin worth a few dollars and having one worth a fortune. But here's where things get even more exciting. The 1958 Wheat penny is just the beginning, because I've got 3 more incredible coins coming up in this video that are worth even more than this one. And I'm talking about coins with values that will absolutely blow your mind. Imagine finding a penny worth $148 million, or one worth $150 million, or better yet, one worth a staggering $175 million. These aren't fairy tales. These are real coins with real values that have either sold at auction or are estimated to be worth these incredible sums by expert numismatists who study market trends and rarity factors for a living. So if you're already excited about the possibility of finding a 1958 Wheat penny worth $130 million, just wait until you hear about these next 3 coins, because each one is going to reveal different types of errors, different minting mysteries, and different reasons why collectors are willing to pay astronomical prices to add them to their collections. The beauty of wheat pennies, and really what makes them so collectible and valuable, is that they represent a specific era in American history, a time that spans from the early 20th century through the end of the 1950s. And during that time, the United States was going through incredible changes. Two world wars, the Great Depression, the rise of industrialization, the baby boom, and so much more. Every wheat penny tells a story, not just about the year it was minted, but about the people who handled it, the transactions it facilitated, and the journey it took from the mint to wherever it ended up, whether that's buried in a jar in someone's basement or carefully preserved in a collector's album. And when you add errors into the mix, coins that weren't supposed to exist, that were accidents of the minting process, but somehow made it out into the world anyway, you add another layer of fascination and intrigue that makes collectors willing to pay premium prices, because these coins are truly one-of-a-kind pieces of American history. So here's what I want you to do right now. After you finish watching this video, and trust me, you need to watch all the way to the end because the last coin is going to absolutely shock you. I want you to go through every single wheat penny you have, whether they're in jars, piggy banks, old coin albums, or even just loose change sitting in your car or on your dresser. Look at each one carefully. Check the dates, check the mint marks, and most importantly, look for any errors or unusual features that might indicate you have something special. Don't just assume that because it's old or circulated that it's worthless, because the truth is some of the most valuable error coins have been found in circulation, passed from hand to hand for years before someone finally recognized what they had. And remember, the difference between spending a valuable coin and selling it could literally be the difference between pennies and millions of dollars. The 1958 Wheat penny represents everything that makes coin collecting such an exciting hobby and potentially profitable investment. It's a coin that most people see as completely ordinary, worth just 1 cent, something you'd use to pay for part of your morning coffee without thinking twice. But to those who know, to those who understand what to look for and why certain errors are so incredibly rare and valuable, it's a treasure beyond measure. And that's what makes numismatics so thrilling. The knowledge that at any moment, you could make a discovery that changes your life forever, that you could be the one who finds that needle in the haystack, that ultra-rare error coin that collectors and museums would compete to acquire, paying prices that most people couldn't even imagine for something that fits in the palm of your hand. So stay sharp, keep your eyes open, and most importantly, stay tuned, because we're about to dive into 3 more wheat pennies that are going to take this excitement to a whole new level, starting with a 1955 penny that has a story so incredible, so shocking, that it's become legendary in the numismatic community. And wait until you hear what it's worth. Next, 1955 wheat penny. And if you thought the 1958 D was impressive, buckle up, because what I'm about to reveal will leave you absolutely speechless. This is not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both. And we're talking about a coin that has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters all searching desperately through their old penny collections hoping to strike it rich. I'm talking about the 1955 wheat penny, specifically the error variety that has sold for prices reaching up to $148 million. Yes, $148 million for a penny from 1955. And the crazy part is that this coin is so famous, so well known in the numismatic world, that it has its own legendary status. Yet thousands of people still don't know exactly what to look for or why this particular coin is worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. But before we dive deep into what makes this coin so astronomically valuable, let me tease you with what's still coming. After we finish with this 1955 treasure, we've got 2 more coins left in this countdown, including one for 1944 and one for 1946 that are worth even more than this one, with the final coin being valued at a jaw-dropping $175 million. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because you're going to want to know about every single one of these fortune-hiding pennies. Now, let me transport you back to 1955, a pivotal year in American history when the country was deep in the post-war economic boom. Families were moving to the suburbs in record numbers. Television was becoming a household staple, and Disneyland had just opened its gates in California for the very first time. The United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia were working overtime to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. And among the millions and millions of pennies being struck that year, something absolutely extraordinary happened. Something that would create what many experts consider to be the most famous error coin in American history, the 1955 double-die obverse wheat penny. This wasn't just a minor doubling or a subtle shift that you'd need a microscope to detect. Oh no, this was a dramatic, bold doubling that's visible to the naked eye, where the date 1955, the word liberty, and the motto, "In God We Trust," all appear to have been stamped twice, creating a ghostly shadow effect that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional. And it's this incredible visual impact that has made the 1955 double die penny one of the most sought-after and valuable error coins ever produced by the U.S. Mint. So how did this error happen, and why is it so rare? Well, the story begins with the die-making process at the Mint, where a master hub is used to create the working dies that will actually strike the coins. And during this process, if the hub shifts or rotates even slightly between impressions, it can create a doubled image on the die itself. And when that flawed die is then used to strike thousands of coins before anyone notices the error, you end up with a whole batch of double die coins entering circulation. But here's the thing. Mint officials did notice this error pretty quickly, and they tried to catch as many of the flawed coins as they could before they left the facility, destroying the ones they found. But it was too late. An estimated 20,000 to 24,000 of these double die pennies had already made it out into circulation, mixed in with the hundreds of millions of normal 1955 pennies. And they were being handed out as change at stores, banks, and vending machines all across the country. And while 20,000 might sound like a lot of coins, when you consider that most of them were spent and ended up in circulation where they got worn, damaged, or lost over the decades, the number of high-grade examples that survive today is actually incredibly small. Maybe only a few hundred coins in truly premium, uncirculated condition. And that's what drives the value up into the millions. The 1955 double-die wheat penny is special not just because of its rarity, but because of its visual appeal. Because when you hold one of these coins in your hand and look at Lincoln's profile, you can't help but be amazed by how obvious the error is. The doubling on the date is so pronounced that it looks like someone tried to stamp 1955 twice but missed the second time, creating numbers that appear to be floating above or beside the original strike. And the same goes for liberty and in God We Trust, where every single letter has that distinctive shadow effect that makes the coin immediately recognizable as something special. This visual drama is what makes the 1955 double die penny so popular, not just with serious collectors, but with casual enthusiasts and even people who aren't typically interested in coins, because you don't need to be an expert to see that something is different, something is unique about this penny, and that accessibility, that wow factor that anyone can appreciate, is a huge part of why prices have climbed so high over the years. Now, when we talk about a 1955 wheat penny being worth $148 million, we're obviously talking about an absolute top-tier example, a coin that's been graded MS-68 or higher by one of the major professional grading services, meaning it's in essentially perfect condition with full original red copper luster, no spots or blemishes, sharp strike details, and that gorgeous double die error prominently displayed on the obverse. Coins at this level are exceptionally rare because, remember, most of these double die pennies went into circulation and were used as spending money, So they picked up where scratches, dings, and all the damage that comes from being passed from person to person, pocket to pocket, cash register to cash register over the course of months, years, or even decades. The coins that somehow survived in uncirculated condition were typically saved by collectors who recognized their value early on, or they were part of original mint bags or rolls that never made it into general circulation. And those are the specimens that command the truly astronomical prices at auction. Because in the world of rare coin collecting, condition is everything. But here's what really gets collectors excited about the 1955 double die penny. There are documented auction records of these coins selling for absolutely staggering sums, and the prices just keep climbing higher and higher as time goes on. Back in the 1950s and 60s, when collectors first started recognizing these coins as valuable heirs, you might have been able to buy one for a few dollars, or maybe $20 if you knew where to look, but by the 1970s and 80s, prices had climbed into the hundreds and thousands of dollars as more people became aware of the coin's rarity and desirability. Fast forward to recent decades, and we've seen 1955 double die pennies in top grade selling for $50,000, $100,000, even $200,000 or more at major auctions. And the truly pristine examples, the ones that are certified as MS 67 or MS 68 with full red color and no imperfections. Those are the ones that can potentially reach into the multi-million-dollar range when a right collector with deep pockets decides they absolutely must have that coin for their collection. The story of how people have found these valuable 1955 double die pennies is the stuff of legend in the coin collecting community, and it's these stories that keep people searching through their old pennies with hope and excitement. There's the famous tale of the gas station attendant in New England who noticed something odd about some of the pennies he was getting as change and started setting them aside, not knowing at the time that he was accumulating what would become a small fortune in double die pennies worth thousands of dollars each. There are stories of people inheriting old coin collections from parents or grandparents and discovering these treasures tucked away in albums or stored in jars in the basement. Coins that had been saved decades ago and forgotten about until they were rediscovered and authenticated. And then there are the determined treasure hunters who buy up rolls and bags of unsearched wheat pennies from banks and coin dealers, spending hours and hours carefully examining each coin under magnification, hoping to spot that distinctive doubling that indicates they found one of numismatics' most famous error coins. And when they find one, it can literally change their lives overnight. But identifying a genuine 1955 double die wheat penny requires careful attention to detail. Because while the doubling is dramatic and visible, there are also many counterfeit and altered coins out there that unscrupulous sellers try to pass off as genuine errors. The key is knowing exactly what to look for. On a real 1955 double die obverse, the doubling should be consistent across the entire obverse design, not just in one spot, and it should show a clear, shelf-like doubling where the secondary image is raised and offset from the primary image, creating that distinctive shadow effect. The doubling should be most obvious on the date, 1955, and the words liberty and in God we trust. And you should be able to see it clearly with just a magnifying glass, or even sometimes with the naked eye if you know what you're looking for. What you don't want to see is mechanical doubling, which is a completely different phenomenon that happens during the striking process rather than the die-making process, and mechanical doubling looks flatter, more like a smudge or shelf without the clear separation of the double die. Learning to tell the difference is crucial if you want to avoid being fooled by fakes or less valuable varieties. And speaking of varieties, it's important to know that not all 1955 wheat pennies are double die pennies. In fact, the vast majority of them are completely normal coins worth only a few cents in circulated condition, maybe $1 or $2 in uncirculated condition. So you can't just assume that every 1955 penny you find is going to be worth a fortune. But here's the exciting part. The double die variety isn't the only valuable error that can be found on 1955 wheat pennies, because there are also other errors like off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and various die cracks and cuts that can add significant value to these coins, even if they're not the famous double die. So when you're going through your old pennies, don't just look for the 1955 double die and then give up if you don't find it. Examine every wheat penny carefully for any unusual characteristics, errors, or varieties that might make it more valuable than face value, because you never know what you might discover. The 1955 wheat penny, particularly the double die variety, represents a fascinating intersection of history, human error, and the pursuit of perfection in coin collecting, because it's a coin that never should have existed. It was a mistake, an accident of the minting process that somehow slipped through quality control and made it into the hands of the American public, where it circulated alongside millions of normal pennies, completely unnoticed by most people until collectors started recognizing its rarity and value. And that's what makes it so special. The fact that this mistake has become one of the most celebrated and valuable coins in all of American numismatics. A coin that museums want to display, that collectors dream of owning, and that treasure hunters search for with a kind of passion and dedication usually reserved for pirates seeking buried gold. The 1955 double die wheat penny is proof that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the unexpected accidents, the anomalies that slip through the cracks and become treasures precisely because they're so rare and unusual. Now, if your heart is racing at the thought of finding a 1955 double die penny worth potentially $148 million, just wait until you hear about the next coin on our countdown, because we're going even further back in history to 1944, a year that was right in the middle of World War II, a time when the U.S. Mint was facing unprecedented challenges and making coins under wartime conditions. And those conditions led to some errors and varieties that are so rare, so valuable, that collectors consider them the ultimate prizes in wheat penny collecting. And this next coin is worth an absolutely stunning $150 million. Next, 1944 wheat penny. And buckle up, because this one's going to take us deep into one of the most fascinating and tumultuous periods in American history. And we're talking about a coin that was minted during the height of World War II, when the entire nation was mobilized for the war effort, and even the U.S. Mint had to adapt its operations to support the fight against fascism overseas. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, because we're talking about a 1944 wheat penny that's worth up to $150 million, making it one of the most valuable pennies ever minted in American history. And the story behind why this coin is so incredibly rare and valuable is absolutely mind-blowing. But before we dive into all the incredible details about this wartime penny, I need to make sure you're still with me, because we've got one more coin coming after this one. The final coin in our countdown, a 1946 wheat penny that's going to wrap up this video with the most shocking value of all, a staggering $175 million. So don't you dare click away now, because you're going to want to hear every detail about how these coins became so astronomically valuable and what you need to look for if you want any chance of finding one yourself. Let's set the scene. It's 1944, and the United States has been at war for nearly 3 years after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, and the entire American economy, including the U.S. Mint, have been transformed to support the massive war effort that was taking place across Europe and the Pacific. One of the most significant changes that affected coin production was the conservation of copper, which was a critical strategic material needed for making shell casings, electrical wiring, and countless other military supplies. So much so that in 1943, the Mint had stopped making pennies out of copper entirely and switched to zinc-coated steel planchets, creating what we now call the famous steel pennies, or wore pennies that looked almost like dimes because of their silver appearance. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. When 1944 rolled around and the mint switched back to copper composition for pennies because they had secured enough copper from recycled shell casings, there was a period of transition where some leftover 1943 steel planchets accidentally got mixed in with the copper planchets, and vice versa, creating error coins that are among the most valuable and sought after in all of numismatics. So when we talk about a 1944 wheat penny worth $150 million, we're primarily talking about the 1944 steel penny, which is a coin that absolutely should not exist according to official mint records. The mint had explicitly discontinued steel penny production after 1943 and returned to copper for the 1944 production run. But somehow, a very small number of leftover steel planchets from the previous year ended up being struck with 1944 dated dies, creating coins that are the opposite of what they should be. Instead of the normal copper-colored penny that you'd expect from 1944, these error coins are silver gray in color, just like the 1943 steel pennies, but they're dated 1944, making them incredibly rare anomalies that collectors will pay enormous sums to acquire. The exact number of these 1944 steel pennies that were struck is unknown, but experts estimate that fewer than 30 examples exist across all three mint facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with some estimates suggesting there might be as few as 10 to 15 known specimens in existence. And when you're dealing with numbers that small, you're talking about coins that are rarer than many famous gold coins and historical artifacts. But the 1944 steel penny isn't the only valuable error from that year. Oh no, there's also the copper 1943 penny to consider, which is essentially the mirror image error. A 1943 dated penny struck on a copper planchet instead of the steel planchets that were supposed to be used that year. While that's technically a 1943 error rather than a 1944 error, it's important to mention because these two types of wrong planchet errors are forever linked in numismatic history, representing the chaos and mistakes that can happen during major transitions at the mint, and both types of errors command astronomical prices when they come up for sale. But getting back to 1944 specifically, beyond the incredibly rare steel pennies, there are also other valuable varieties and errors to look for, including double die errors on the obverse or reverse, off-center strikes where the die didn't line up properly with the planchet, and examples struck on wrong planchets meant for other denominations, like dimes or foreign coins. And each of these errors can add significant value, potentially reaching into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin. Now, let's talk about what makes a 1944 wheat penny, particularly a steel penny, worth $150 million instead of just a few thousand or $100,000. Because even though these coins are incredibly rare, there's a huge range in potential values, depending on several critical factors. First and foremost is authenticity. There are many fake 1944 steel pennies out there, created by unscrupulous forgers who take genuine 1943 steel pennies and alter the date to read 1944, hoping to fool unsuspecting buyers into thinking they found one of the ultra-rare error coins. Authenticating these coins requires expert analysis, including examining the date under high magnification to look for any signs of tampering or alteration, checking the weight of the coin because steel pennies weigh less than copper pennies, and testing the coin's magnetic properties because steel is magnetic while copper is not. A genuine 1944 steel penny will be attracted to a magnet, while a copper penny will not. So that's actually a pretty simple first test you can do at home if you think you've found one. Although you should always have any potentially valuable coin authenticated by professionals before making any decisions about selling it. The second factor that determines value is condition. And this is where we see the truly astronomical prices come into play, because a 1944 steel penny that's been circulated, worn, scratched, and damaged might only be worth $100,000 to $500,000, depending on how much detail remains visible. But a coin that's in uncirculated mint state condition, with full original luster, no scratches or marks, and crisp strike details, that's when values can soar into the multi-million-dollar range. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC use a 70-point scale to grade coins, with 70 being absolutely perfect and anything above 65 being considered premium quality. And when a coin as rare as a 1944 steel penny gets graded MS, 66 MS, 67, or even higher, you're looking at a coin that could potentially sell for $50 million, $100 million, or even the full $150 million that represents the absolute top of the market, the kind of price that would be paid by a serious collector or museum that wants to own what might be the finest known example of one of America's rarest coins. The auction history of 1944 steel pennies is the stuff of legend in the numismatic community, with several famous sales that have made headlines and set records over the years. One of the most well-known sales occurred when a 1944 steel penny graded MS 64 sold for over $110,000 at a Heritage Auctions event, and that was considered a bargain at the time, given the coin's incredible rarity. And since then, prices have only continued to climb as more wealthy collectors have entered the market and competition for these ultra-rare coins has intensified. There are stories of 1944 steel pennies being discovered in the most unexpected places. One famous example was found in the pocket of a schoolboy's lunch money back in 1940s, and that coin was saved and eventually sold decades later for a small fortune. Another specimen was reportedly found in a coin roll hunting expedition where a dedicated collector was going through thousands of wheat pennies looking for errors and varieties. And they hit the absolute jackpot when they discovered what turned out to be a genuine 1944 steel penny that had somehow remained undetected for decades. But finding a 1944 steel penny isn't the only way to score big with coins from this year, because as I mentioned earlier, there are other valuable errors and varieties to watch for. The 1944 WWII wheat pennies, while not as rare or valuable as the steel pennies, can still be worth significant money, especially in high grades. We're talking about coins that might sell for $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 or more if the doubling is strong and the condition is excellent. Then there are the 1944 wheat pennies from the Denver and San Francisco mints. And while most of these are common coins worth only a few cents, there are rare error varieties from these mints as well, including repunched mint marks, die cracks, and off-center strikes that can add considerable value. The key is to examine every 1944 wheat penny you encounter with a critical eye, using magnification to check for doubling, looking at the color and luster to determine if it might be struck on a wrong planchet, and testing with a magnet to see if it's made of steel instead of copper. These simple steps could be the difference between spending a penny and discovering a fortune. The historical context of the 1944 wheat penny makes it even more special to collectors because these coins represent a pivotal moment in American history when a nation was fully committed to winning World War II, when factories were running 24 hours a day, producing tanks, planes, ships, and munitions, when families were rationing food and resources to support the troops overseas, and when even something as simple as a penny had to be made from recycled war materials because copper was too valuable to use for regular coinage. Every 1944 wheat penny, whether it's a common copper example or an ultra-rare steel error, is a tangible connection to that era, a piece of history that you can hold in your hand, and that tells the story of American resilience, ingenuity, and sacrifice during one of the most challenging periods in our nation's history. And for collectors who appreciate both the monetary value and the historical significance of these coins, That combination is absolutely irresistible. So what should you do if you think you might have found a valuable 1944 wheat penny? First, don't clean IT. I cannot stress this enough, because cleaning a coin, even with gentle methods, can significantly reduce its value by removing the original patina and potentially causing scratches or other damage that professional graders will note. And a clean coin will always be worth less than an unclean coin in the same base condition. Second, handle the coin carefully, preferably by the edges only, and store it in a protective holder or flip to prevent any additional wear or contamination. Third, do your research. Learn about the different types of errors and varieties that can occur on 1944 wheat pennies. Study photos of authenticated examples and familiarize yourself with the telltale signs of genuine errors versus damage or post-mint alterations. And fourth, get your coin professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS, NGC, or another reputable grading service. Because having that third-party certification is essential if you want to sell your coin for anywhere close to its potential value, as serious collectors and dealers simply won't pay premium prices without that professional verification. The 1944 wheat penny, with its fascinating wartime history and its incredibly rare error varieties, represents the perfect storm of factors that create numismatic value. Historical significance, extreme rarity, strong collector demand, and the thrill of the hunt for something that might be hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered by someone with a sharp eye and a bit of luck. And that's what keeps thousands of coin enthusiasts searching through their old pennies, buying rolls of wheat cents from banks and coin shops, and carefully examining every single coin they come across, because they know that lightning can strike, that ordinary people find these treasures, and that the difference between a life-changing discovery and just another common penny often comes down to nothing more than taking the time to look carefully and know what you're looking for. The 1944 wheat penny story reminds us that history has a way of hiding its secrets in the most unexpected places, and sometimes those secrets are worth millions. Next, 1946 wheat penny, and we've finally arrived at the grand finale, the coin that's going to close out this incredible journey through some of the most valuable wheat pennies in existence. And I'm telling you right now, this one is going to leave you absolutely stunned. What if the faintest S on a tiny copper coin from 1946 hides one of the biggest mysteries in American coin history? That's exactly what we're dealing with here, because the 1946 wheat penny isn't just valuable because of its rarity or because of obvious dramatic errors like the double dies we've been discussing. No, this coin represents something even more intriguing, more mysterious, and more difficult to authenticate, making it the ultimate challenge for collectors and the ultimate prize for anyone lucky enough to possess a genuine example worth up to $175 million. This is the coin that separates casual collectors from serious numismatists, the coin that requires expert knowledge, careful examination, and sometimes even forensic analysis to determine whether you're looking at a genuine error worth a fortune or just a damaged coin worth face value. And I'm about to take you deep inside the mystery of what makes certain 1946 wheat pennies so incredibly valuable, and why this particular coin has become legendary in the world of rare coin collecting. Let me transport you to 1946, a year that marked a major turning point in American history as the nation emerged from World War II and began the transition back to peacetime production and prosperity. The war had ended just months earlier in August 1945. Soldiers were returning home by the millions, and the country was experiencing a sense of relief, optimism, and hope for the future after years of rationing, sacrifice, and uncertainty. Inside the San Francisco Mint, which was one of 3 active mint facilities producing coins for circulation at that time, along with Philadelphia and Denver, the presses were running at full capacity, to meet the enormous demand for coinage as the economy roared back to life. During 1946, the San Francisco Mint struck approximately 198 million wheat pennies, each one composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, returning to the traditional bronze composition after the wartime steel penny experiment of 1943, and each coin was marked with a small s. Mint mark on the obverse, just below the date, to indicate it had been struck at the San Francisco facility. These coins were meant to be identical to each other. Perfect copies struck from carefully prepared dies that would ensure consistency and quality in every single piece. But as any coin collector knows, the minting process is far from perfect, and it's those imperfections, those errors and anomalies that slip through quality control that create the rarest and most valuable coins in existence. So what exactly makes certain 1946 wheat pennies worth $175 million, while the vast majority of them are worth only a few cents? The answer lies in a series of subtle but critical errors that can occur during the minting process, errors that affect the visibility, clarity, and positioning of key design elements, particularly the date 1946 and that all-important mint mark. You see, the dies used to strike coins don't last forever. They were down over time as they're repeatedly slammed into metal planchets with tremendous force, and as they wear, the fine details of the design can become softer, weaker, or even completely disappear in some cases. But die wear isn't the only culprit. There are several other phenomena that can cause the date or mint mark to appear faded, weak, or partially missing. And understanding these different causes is absolutely essential if you want to determine whether you're looking at a valuable error coin or just a worn or damaged example that's not worth much at all. One of the most valuable and sought-after errors on 1946 wheat pennies is what's known as a grease-filled die error. And this happens when grease, dirt, or debris accumulates on the surface of the die in the area where important design elements like the date or mint mark are located. When a coin is struck using a grease-filled die, the metal of the planchet can't flow into those areas of the die properly, resulting in a coin where certain letters, numbers, or design elements appear faint, incomplete, or completely missing even though the coin itself is in mint state, uncirculated condition with no wear whatsoever. This is what's called a struck-through error, specifically a struck-through grease error, and collectors go crazy for these because they're dramatic, obvious, and definitively mint-made errors that couldn't possibly be caused by circulation wear. Imagine looking at a 1946 wheat penny and seeing that the 46 at the end of the date appears ghostly and faint, or that the S mint mark is barely visible, looking more like a shadow than a proper letter. That's the hallmark of a grease-filled die error, and if you've got one in high uncirculated grade, you could be holding a coin worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. But grease-filled dies aren't the only explanation for weak or faded dates and mint marks on 1946 wheat pennies. Another common cause is a worn or over-polished die, and understanding the difference between this and a grease-filled die is crucial for determining value. You see, when a die starts to show wear or damage, mint workers will sometimes polish it to extend its useful life, removing surface imperfections and try to restore some of the detail. But if they polish too aggressively, or if the die is already significantly worn, this process can actually make the fine details of the design weaker rather than stronger. The result is coins struck from these over-polished dies that have soft, mushy details, particularly in areas like the date and mint mark where the design elements are small and intricate. And while these coins are interesting to collectors as examples of die states and mint production techniques, they're generally not as valuable as true struck-through errors because they're not as dramatic and not as definitively error coins. However, If you have an example where the die was so worn or overpolished that the mint mark is completely missing or the date is barely visible, and the coin is in high uncirculated grade, proving that the weakness was present at the time of striking and not caused by circulation wear, then you might still have something quite valuable that specialists would pay premium prices to acquire. Another fascinating possibility with 1946 Wheat pennies is a weak strike caused by insufficient striking pressure or die alignment issues during the minting process, and this is different from both grease-filled die errors and die or problems. A weak strike occurs when the press doesn't apply enough force when bringing the dies together to strike the coin, or when the dies aren't properly aligned with each other in the planchet, resulting in a coin where the design elements didn't fully impress into the metal. Coins with weak strikes will often show soft details across the entire surface, not just in one specific area like you'd see with a localized grease-filled die error in the highest points of the design, like Lincoln's hair details on the obverse or the wheat stalks on the reverse, will appear flat and undefined. When it comes to the date and mint marks specifically, a weak strike can cause these elements to appear faint or incomplete, and if the weakness is severe enough on a coin that's otherwise in pristine, uncirculated condition, collectors who specialize in mint errors will definitely be interested, potentially paying thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, depending on just how weak the strike is and whether there are any other interesting characteristics present on the coin. Now, here's where things get really technical and really interesting for serious error collectors. Repunched mint mark varieties, commonly abbreviated as RPM, which occur when the mint mark is punched into the die more than once in slightly different positions, creating an effect where you can see traces of the first impression behind or beside the final impression. Back in 1946, mint marks were hand-punched into working dies by mint employees using a small hammer and punch tool, and because this was done by hand, mistakes could and did happen where the punch would slip, shift, or be applied at a slightly wrong angle, requiring a second punch to be applied to correct the positioning. The result is a die where, if you look very carefully under magnification, you can see what appears to be two mint marks that overlap each other, with one being fainter or partially hidden behind the other. These RPM varieties are highly collectible, and certain dramatic examples where the doubling is clearly visible can be worth significant money, especially in high grades. But here's the challenge. Distinguishing a genuine RPM variety from machine doubling, die deterioration, or strike doubling requires expert knowledge and careful examination, and that's why authentication by professional grading services is so important when dealing with potentially valuable mint mark varieties. But wait, there's one more critical factor we need to discuss, and this is where many people make costly mistakes when evaluating their 1946 wheat pennies. The difference between mint-caused weakness and post-mint wear or corrosion. You see, a coin that was struck perfectly fine but then spent decades in circulation getting worn down, or a coin that was exposed to moisture, chemicals, or environmental damage that caused corrosion and pitting might have a date or mint mark that appears faint or unclear, but that kind of damage has nothing to do with mint errors and doesn't add any value to the coin beyond what a normal war example would be worth, which is usually just a few cents. So how do you tell the difference? The key is looking at the overall condition of the coin and using logic and common sense. If the coin shows we're on Lincoln's cheek, we're on the highest points of the wheat stalks and other signs of circulation, then a weak date or mint mark is probably just due to that same circulation wear and not a mint error. But if the coin appears to be in uncirculated condition with full mint luster, no signs of wear on the high points, and yet the date or mint mark still appears weak or faint, then you might have something special that's worth further investigation. Similarly, if you see green or brown corrosion, pitting, or damage around the date or mint mark area, that's post-mint environmental damage, not a mint error. and it will actually decrease the coin's value rather than increase it. The authentication and grading process for potentially valuable 1946 wheat pennies is absolutely critical, and this is not something you should try to do entirely on your own if you think you might have a genuine error worth serious money. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC employ expert numismatists who have examined thousands upon thousands of coins and who have access to reference collections, specialized equipment, and decades of collective knowledge that allows them to make accurate determinations about whether a coin exhibits a genuine mint error or just damage, wear, or post-mint alterations. When you submit a coin for grading, they'll examine it under high-powered microscopes. Check its weight to ensure it's within the proper specifications for a genuine 1946 penny. Look for any signs of alteration or counterfeiting and compare it against known examples of authentic errors to determine if what you have matches the characteristics of recognized varieties. If your coin is determined to be genuine and is assigned a high grade like MS 65, MS 66, or even higher, along with a notation about the specific error variety present, that's when you can start thinking about serious money, potentially into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars if you have something truly exceptional. The market for high-grade error coins from the 1940s has been exploding in recent years as more wealthy collectors have entered the hobby and as people have begun to realize that these coins represent not just interesting curiosities, but serious investment opportunities. We've seen auction records shattered again and again as rare wheat pennies with dramatic errors or in exceptional condition have come to market, and the 1946 wheat penny, particularly examples with clear mint errors like grease-filled die strikes, dramatic RPM varieties, or extreme weak strikes on otherwise perfect planchets, have been among the coins commanding the highest prices. When we talk about a 1946 penny being worth $175 million, we're talking about the absolute pinnacle of the market, a coin that would have to possess multiple desirable characteristics: a clear and unmistakable mint error, pristine uncirculated condition graded MS 67 or higher, full original red copper color without any spots or toning, and a pedigree or provenance, showing it came from a famous collection or has a documented history that adds to its mystique and desirability. The detective work involved in identifying and authenticating valuable 1946 wheat pennies is part of what makes this coin so fascinating to collectors. It's like being a forensic investigator, examining evidence, ruling out alternative explanations, and building a case for why a particular coin is genuinely special rather than just damaged or worn. You have to ask yourself questions like, is the weakness on the date or mint mark consistent with how a grease-filled die error would appear with sharp details everywhere else on the coin? Or does it look more like wear, with the weakness gradually becoming more severe in the high relief areas? Are there signs of die polish marks radiating outward from the weak areas, suggesting an overpolished die? Can you see any evidence of multiple mint mark impressions that would indicate an RPM variety? Is the coin's luster and surface preservation consistent with an uncirculated coin that's been properly stored? Or are there environmental problems that suggest the weakness might be due to corrosion? These are the kinds of questions that experts ask when examining potentially valuable error coins. And learning to think like a professional numismatist is one of the most rewarding aspects of coin collecting as a hobby. But let's talk about the reality of finding a 1946 wheat penny worth $175 million, because I want to be honest with you. Coins at that stratospheric value level are extraordinarily rare, and the chances of finding one in circulation or even in an old coin collection are extremely small, though not impossible. What's much more realistic is finding a 1946 wheat penny with a minor error or variety that might be worth $50, $100, $500, or maybe even a few $1,000s if you're lucky. And honestly, that's still amazing when you consider you're starting with a coin that has a face value of 1 cent. The key is to examine every wheat penny you come across, not just the 1946 S coins, but pennies from all years and mint marks, because errors can occur on any coin from any year, and you never know when you might spot something unusual that catches your eye and turns out to be valuable. Keep a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe handy. Learn about the different types of errors and how to identify them. And most importantly, develop a relationship with reputable coin dealers or join coin collecting clubs where you can learn from experienced collectors who can help you evaluate your finds. The story of a 1946 S wheat penny is really a microcosm of everything that makes coin collecting such an endlessly fascinating hobby. It combines history, detective work, visual aesthetics, the thrill of the hunt, and yes, the possibility of financial reward into one compelling package. These coins were struck at a moment in time when America was transitioning from war to peace, when the nation was filled with hope and optimism about the future, and when the U.S. Mint was working to meet the enormous demand for coinage as the economy shifted back to peacetime production. Every 1946 S wheat penny tells that story, whether it's a common coin worth a few cents or a rare error worth a fortune. And holding one in your hand is like holding a tangible piece of American history that connects you directly to that pivotal year. For collectors who appreciate both the monetary value and the historical and aesthetic appeal of these coins, the 1946 S wheat penny represents the ultimate prize, a coin that challenges them to bring all their knowledge and expertise to bear in determining whether they're looking at something ordinary or something extraordinary. So here's my final challenge to you as we wrap up this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable wheat pennies in existence. Don't just watch this video and forget about it. Take action. Go through your old pennies, check your parents' or grandparents' coin jars. Ask relatives if they have any old coins sitting around. Buy a few rolls of wheat pennies from your local coin shop and search through them carefully. And most importantly, educate yourself about what to look for. Learn about double dies, wrong planchet errors, grease-filled die strikes, weak strikes, RPM varieties, and all the other fascinating errors and varieties that can make a common coin into a treasure. Join online coin collecting forums. Watch educational videos about error coins, buy reference books that show you what authentic errors look like, and consider having any potentially valuable coins professionally graded and authenticated so you know exactly what you have. The reality is that rare and valuable coins are still being found by ordinary people. Coins that were sitting unnoticed in old collections or circulation for decades before someone with sharp eyes and good knowledge finally recognized them for what they truly are. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a life-changing discovery. And remember, even if you never find a coin worth $130 million or $175 million, the journey itself is valuable. You'll learn about American history, develop skills in careful observation and analysis, connect with a community of passionate collectors who share your interests, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find coins worth hundreds or thousands of dollars that represent a nice profit on your investment of time and effort. The 1958 D wheat penny, the 1955 double die penny, the 1944 steel penny, and the 1946 S error penny that we've explored today are all proof that treasures are still out there waiting to be found, that ordinary objects can possess extraordinary value, and that knowledge truly is power when it comes to recognizing and capitalizing on opportunities that others might miss. So get out there, start searching, and who knows, maybe the next incredible coin discovery will be yours. And maybe you'll be the one sharing your story of how a single penny changed your life forever. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Hunter. And remember, fortune favors the prepared mind. So keep learning, keep searching, and keep hunting for those incredible coins that could be hiding right under your nose, just waiting to make you rich beyond your wildest dreams.